All right. We have been gone for a long time, but the boys are back in town. I am joined live from Michigan by Ethan of the Confronting Capital YouTube channel. Um, by from Canada by Victor Bruzzone of Plastic Pills. Also does the academic Edgelords with Ethan and other people. And I am here in the Give Them an Argument studios in sunny Southern California. So I I took a little it took a little selling to get me to agree to do this.
Yeah, it sure did.
It did. I, I'm still kind of two
Both
minds
of you, I
about
feel
this.
like.
But because on the one hand, well, I think the sort of reason to do it and the reason not to do it are kind of the same. But this is, but we've been gone for a long time. Let's start by giving people can eat their vegetables later.
Let's give you a dumpster fire in the meantime.
Yeah, this really seems like quite a dumpster fire. So I was, usually for the Thursday ones, I just make the, this is some extremely unfascinating behind the scenes stuff, but usually for the Thursday ones, I just like make the YouTube link essentially, through StreamYard myself, and I'll do that a little earlier in the day when I get the thumbnail from our graphic designer, Jandrew World. And this time I had just finished writing an article. I was driving to the studio and I had not had a chance to do it yet. So I called our producer Jake to see if he could do it. And, we were like, I was driving, I got to this anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I was driving and we're on the phone and he was like setting it up and I was like guiding him through it. And he was like, okay, so, it's like writing the title. It's like, who's in this? And I told him all that. I was like, are you sure this is the thing that happened? Because this really sounds like just a dream you had.
Yeah, totally. It does sound like it's like these people were in my dream and they were all together in the same room, and it's like, oh, that's weird. That's bizarre. That would never happen.
Yeah. So this is repeated. Give them an argument guest, Glenn Greenwald. Zero time. Give them an argument guest, Alex Jones. And the Krassenstein brothers, who I sort of have a vague meme infused idea of who they are. And Destiny, who some of us have had repeated conversations with. And it's something about January. I mean, honestly, I'm very confused about this. This was your idea, Victor. So set up what we're about to watch.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's a really dumb debate about, is January 6th a coup attempt? So there's going to be some debates about what counts as a coup, which are going to be really mind-numbing. But I mean, really, we're here for, as you put it, we're not eating our vegetables today. This is going to be a total dumpster fire. And I did watch most of this ahead of time, and I think watching it, I was like, this would be fun to do, just because I think there's so much, it's so chaotic, that it is really just kind of I don't know. We're not here for the substance. We're here to maybe psychoanalyze Alex Jones and see what's wrong with his mind and why. At least that's what I'm here to do. I was like, this isn't even about analyzing the argument. It's I want to understand, is Alex Jones at a different level of human maturity than other people in terms of just talking and listening? He seems like a child, but we'll see. I mean, I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but my read on it when I was initially looking at it, I was like, he seems like a child on the playground, like a bunch of times. You're just like, this is not an adult. And you can even feel the people on his side are kind of looking at him and being like, oh, I don't know. This is can we have the adults talk now?
Yeah.
But you missed one person. It's that Beatty guy, right? It's that is it something? It's not Warren Beatty, because it's an actor, right? It's
yeah, Warren Beatty is an actor, correct? Is
Anyway, some right wing guy named like Beatty something who I recognized him because I realized that one of the professors in my department, Ronald Biener, who's a political theorist who had that he had that not an altercation, but he had that issue with his student who ended up being a fascist or whatever, Michael Millerman. You might have heard a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And this guy with the last name Beatty I think he's a Millerman supporter, and he's kind of trolled Ronald Biener on Twitter a bunch of times, and I've seen that come up. So anyway, that's the pitch. And I don't know why. I think I just wanted something mindless coming back, and I was like, Ben, let's do this. It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be funny. We're going to get to laugh a lot. I hope there's going to be a lot of laughter. Substance, you've come to the wrong place for that.
Yeah. Anybody tuning in for the first time, I really promise we do cover a lot that has substance. And
we'll make it more substantive here. We'll make it more substantive.
Just imagining someone whose like New Year's resolution was to listen to more philosophy streams, so they tune into this one. Like the first Ben Burgess show they've heard.
Yeah. Man, I mean, we watched we've done like Michael Harrington argued with William F. Buckley on here. There's been like so much stuff with actual substance, but here
we did that highbrow. I don't know how highbrow it was, but I remember it was like super like philosophical and technical, like I think about consciousness and like
yeah, it was
like computer consciousness.
Yeah,
John Searle, like that was some heavy stuff. We do some real heavy, real philosophy here, often.
Yeah. And sometimes we do this. So tonight is the night that we're going to do this. So I was kind of thinking about how to do this, and whether sort of talk a little bit about, what we all think of the substance of the issue. But I think maybe, as Lewis Carroll says, adventures before explanations. Let's watch a little bit of this, and then maybe we can weigh in on what they had to say.
Would you have been okay in the year 2000 if Gore refused to certify the vote because he didn't like what was happening in Florida?
A lot of Democrats did want him to do that.
Question? Glenn, answer the question.
Yeah, and I would have actually. Yes, a lot of Democrats were angry about that.
I'm not asking if a lot of I'm asking you would be okay personally if he refused to certify the vote.
I think there were two.
You won't answer the question. What would have happened if Pence would have thrown out the vote?
No, that's a hypothetical. Trump wanted a 10-day investigation.
No, but
I don't care
he
what Trump
also wanted Pence to throw out the
what would have happened? What would you have called that?
And we're pushing for that.
Yeah, what would we have called that? Can I get a name for that? If you don't want to call it a coup or an insurrection, what would you call that?
Well, I'd call it taking Trump off the ballot and saying we can't vote for him.
I know you won't answer because you probably know he's guilty. That's fine. What about you, Glenn?
Guilty.
Glenn, what would you call it if the president was able to entrench his power by asking his vice president to throw out the vote unilaterally, which is what he was trying to do? Do you want to deny the facts? Do you want to deny that it's a coup? What part?
A coup.
Why didn't he call them off immediately if he thought it didn't make him look good?
It was happening while he was giving a speech.
Wrong. The reason why he didn't call them off is because Kim, Giuliani, and Eastman were making phone calls to other senators and congressmen asking them to decertify the electoral vote.
No.
You were there, but you weren't. Do you acknowledge that happened, or do you not acknowledge it?
We're talking about the crowd.
I don't care about the crowd. I'm saying that as the riot was raging on and he was sitting there sipping his Diet Coke, if this really made him and his followers look bad, why didn't Donald Trump make a video immediately?
I'm about to do it because I can talk over you really easy.
That's what you've been doing the whole time.
No, you're doing it.
I look forward to you dodging the question again. Go ahead.
You're doing it. You're doing it.
No, you.
So, you.
No, you.
You.
No, you. Both of you.
Keep doing it.
Jump into it. I want to introduce our panel of incredible people, as I said earlier, and I'm going to start from the end and give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. We have Ed Krassenstein.
Yeah, how's it going? I'm Ed Krassenstein. You know me on X at Ed Krassen, also the twin brother of Brian.
Thanks for pointing out that it's Krassenstein, not Krassenstein.
Well, it can actually be either. You can do Krassenstein or Krassenstein, and I really don't care what you use. So.
It's Frankenstein, not Stein.
Okay. Not Frankenstein. But
that was Alex Jones, if you didn't know. We also have Brian Krassenstein.
Hey, and it's great to be here. I'm Brian Krassenstein, known as Krassenstein on X. Ed's slightly better looking and more intelligent twin brother.
And modest as well. Probably the most modest of the Krassensteins. Next to Brian, we have Stephen Bonnell, known as Destiny. What's happening, man?
Hey, what's up? You know me on YouTube at Destiny. My real life name is Steven, and I scream and shout at people on the internet for a living.
Next to this dude, we got Alex Jones, Alex, explain yourself.
Well, I don't think I probably needed much of an introduction, but I mean, I was there on January 6th, and I saw what happened. And so it's a very important discussion we're about to have tonight. I'm glad everybody came. We need to have more of this, not just left and right, but just different groups of people debating and discussing. I'm really glad that Zero Hedge and their great subscription service, people supporting it, is financing this. And so you're going to see a lot more of this with people supporting Zero Hedge. And so I'm just honored to be here with you guys in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Zero Hedge. Great company. Great people, too. Really great people involved with the company. And to your left, my right, Darren Beatty. What's happening, man?
Great to be here. Thank you. I'm Darren Beatty. I run a news site called revolver.news, which is reported extensively on January 6th. And you can also see me on X at Darren J. Beatty.
And you're a Trump advisor and speechwriter.
Yes.
And a former professor. And you helped quarterback a lot of the groundbreaking stuff that Tucker Carlson put up.
Indeed.
So I'll sing your praises since you.
Thank you.
And we also have coming in remote live, Glenn Greenwald from your studio in Brazil. What's happening, Glenn?
Hey everybody, Glenn Greenwald. I'm a journalist. I'm the host of System Update on Rumble. I had planned to be there in person. A little logistical problems intervened, and I wish I could be, but I'm really looking forward to participating. And I just want to echo Alex. I think what Zero Hedge is doing is so important, organizing these kind of substantive structured debates among people who obviously disagree pretty strongly on things, and yet nonetheless can have what I hope will be a civil and spirited debate, what I expect it will be. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I appreciate being asked.
Yes, that is my job, is to make sure that it maintains civility, structure, organization, and that we don't talk over each other, that we end up listening to each other. The real value of humanity, one of the most powerful tools we have, is communication. So I think tonight's going to be an exemplary.
All right. Now, Victor, you said you've already watched most of this. Does it, in fact, maintain those virtues?
Oh, man. Definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah.
No, I do love
That
like
should be
the
obvious
Dave
from that preview.
Rubin-esque like intro. Like, I'm just glad we can discuss these ideas, like given who the panel
know.
consists of and how it turns out.
Yeah,
Very fun.
right.
Totally.
Like it seems
I think,
like
yeah,
you know, it seems like, given the composition, extremely unlikely on his face.
Yeah.
oh yeah. I mean, I will say that maybe the most substantive, like interesting aspect, which I think, but that was also the thing that I was thinking about when I was watching it originally, was because I know, like, and we were talking about this a little bit on Twitter, Ben, just like, or X, whatever, like that Glenn Greenwald, it's kind of interesting the way that he's been sort of shifting his sympathies, or kind of being, well, he's always been anti-establishment, right? He's always said really good stuff that's like against the military industrial complex and very suspicious of centralized power and all that stuff. But I think lately, part of it I was just really interested to hear, because you've talked to Glenn several times. So I'm just, I'm really looking forward to kind of like what you think about the things that he says in this debate.
Yeah, I mean, I actually not, frequently, but the last time was actually last month, right? This is he was on the show. It was recorded, I think, a few days after the last episode before we went on break. Like I was just like wanted a few things that we could like kind of pepper as like sprinkles new content, during the month we were off. So I recorded a couple segments with Matt McManus and one with Glenn Greenwald, and basically the one, because I talked before 2023. The last time I talked to Glenn, on air, was probably when he had me on System Update to talk about my book, right, in 2021. If there's a time since then, I'm not thinking of it. And he'd been on an argument to talk about his book about Brazil before that, but not very long before it, I think. In any case, I might be wrong about some of those details, but like I hadn't talked to him in a long time, right, before 2023. And at the beginning of 2023, like in January, when I was still doing a show on Call-In, Glenn and Branko Markic, a good friend of mine of Jacobin, were arguing on Twitter about essentially whether there were a couple of different issues going on, but like a lot of it was about sort of Glenn played up the anti-interventionist things that would be said by like MAGA Republicans, and sort of giving a lot of credence to the idea that there'd been this big realignment on foreign policy, and not like sort of paying nearly as much attention to anti-interventionism for the left. That was basically what Glenn and Bronco were arguing about. So I invited them both on my call-in show to hash it out there. We replayed it here, and obviously I'm not disinterested. I mean, like it was essentially me and Bronco arguing with Glenn, and then so fast forward to December 2023, and I asked him if, because I'd actually, I don't think it's a secret. I like the guy personally. I enjoy talking to him. I always have. I really admire some of the things that he's done around, exposing NSA spying, and exposing the judicial frame up of Lula da Silva in Brazil. But I don't think it's a secret that politically, I was about to say we've been traveling in different directions, but like I don't think I've traveled anywhere. I think I've been, I think I pretty much think all the same shit that I did like 3 or 4 years ago. And Glenn seems to have been traveling in a direction that that's I mean, if you ask him about it, he would play up, he would emphasize the things that have remained consistent, which I think if we're going to be fair about this, there are quite a few things that have remained consistent. Certainly some of what you were talking about, Victor, some of those sort of anti-establishment instincts have been very consistent. And, and actually part of the reason I reached out to him in December is that I've actually liked quite a bit of what he's had to say since October 7th about the Palestinians and about, sort of free speech, silencing the pro-Palestinian voices and all that stuff. And those are definitely threads over the years, right? But also, if you look at his kind of evaluation of the U.S. political spectrum and the way he draws friend-enemy distinctions and all that stuff, that has shifted like quite radically, right?
Yeah.
Over the years. So he, I was reading Glenn Greenwald in like 2007 at Salon.com, and he, the people he saw as allies there were like, progressive Democrats who would primary challenge, establishment Democrats. And, it is complicated. Like when the Tea Party was going on, like he, I can remember reading things that he wrote in Salon. I think it was still Salon, not the Guardian then, where he was, where he would sort of say, oh, well, actually, in some ways, what the Tea Party's talking about, what Occupy are talking about, there's like, there's the sort of like
overlap.
There's overlap, right? There's the sort of like horseshoe theory, but it's a good thing, right? Kind of views that he would sometimes have, but that was kind of he was pretty enthusiastic about like the Ron Paul campaign, because he was raising all this stuff about war and civil liberties. So there were definitely like early signs, but like as late as 2018, he was a big promoter of AOC when she was running for Congress for the first time. And, I think in over the course of, basically to some extent really started, I think that like him being, I should say correctly, skeptical of a lot of the Russiagate stuff, like I think helped, sort of veer him off in this other direction. And anyway, like, so I have, none of this is new. I've been saying this for years, but it's like, I think that all of this, I think that like this sort of realignment stuff that he believes, I just don't take that seriously, right? Like I just don't think a lot of that stuff's true. And so when I invited him on in December, it was like with the thoughts like, okay, for some of this, we're going to be talking about, Palestine and free speech. We're pretty much going to be agreeing with each other, but also what I want to do. And this wasn't a surprise. Like this was how I pitched it, right? Was I want to revisit, right, that argument from January about foreign policy realignment in light of the fact that the most MAGA Republicans have been the most deranged hawks since October 7th, right? And the most deranged advocates of censoring, pro-Palestinian students on college campuses and, and all this stuff, right? Like, and I wanted to push them on that. And people could watch that conversation, right? I did that, right? So that's like a little incomplete, but I think probably good enough for now, right? Capsule of my history with Glenn Greenwald. But, I will also say, like, all the times I've talked to him, I kind of think I've gotten the best possible version of him. Cause,
I watched your recent interview with him.
Yeah, right. Okay. So he seems, and in there, I mean, he does seem very thoughtful and like, he's like really considering each point, whatever. And, I could imagine this like city block sized dumpster fire that we started to watch not maybe bringing out the best version of him, but I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, you'll be the judge.
Fair enough.
I think my voice is
example
a bit of an echo
of that.
there, by the way.
Let's go for this. The first question I got for you guys, and this is really for the entire panel, and anyone that wants to start it off, maybe we can start with you, Ed, since just because you're on the end and we can move around, is January 6, 2021. Was it an insurrection? And before you answer, I want to read this. This is actually what it's called 18 U.S. Code 2383, rebellion or insurrection.
Yeah, let me do an overhead shot. This is right out of Cornell law here.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to start reading this. This is according to the U.S. Code. Whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. It technically doesn't define insurrection. It's the code talking about what an insurrection is. Of course, they use the word insurrection in the actual code itself. But what do you think? Do you guys think it was an insurrection?
So I personally believe it was an insurrection. And I base that on the fact that 20 court decisions called it an insurrection. And the fact that there was a bill passed in the Senate that called them a mob of insurrectionists. I think the bill passed, or it was in the House of Representatives, 406 to 21. That was a statute to award the police officers medals. And it referred to these individuals as insurrectionists. So, I mean, I think the term can be subjective. I think, people can say nobody was charged with violating Section 2383 of Title 18, which is insurrection and rebellion statute. And nobody was, right? But I don't think that defines whether the event was an insurrection. When I say insurrection, I don't mean everybody there was partaking in insurrection. There are people who were peaceful. The people who walked into the Capitol and did nothing, I don't think that they were insurrectionists. I think they violated the law, but I don't think they were partaking in insurrection. I do think the Proud Boys were partaking in insurrection. I think you could say Donald Trump incited the insurrection. I do.
Destiny, what do you think, man?
I would say the plot from start to finish is quite obviously an insurrection. The only way to get around that is to either justify an insurrection, which is what most conservatives do, they don't realize it, or to deny that an insurrection could ever happen, or if you're not aware of all the facts of what happened. I think that Donald Trump and his cronies had a very coherent plan that they tried to enact from start to finish, starting with false claims of voter fraud, leading to false slates of electors that filed themselves as state electors under perjury, which is what they did, up to the violence that happened on the day of the certification of the vote, where Donald Trump and his friends continued to try to delay the peaceful transfer of power by contravening the certification of the Electoral College vote.
And what I want to make sure that we don't force this into like what they want to call a debate where you got to be be called on or anything. So if any of you guys, Glenn, you as well, man, if any of you guys want to jump in.
Yeah, two of them just went. I want Glenn to go, but I just want to say.
I just want to pause to say that seems like a giant mistake.
Oh, what he just said? Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like, no, seriously, make them wait to be called.
Yeah, this was going so well. It was going well. The first two people, and already the the moderator's just like, this is boring. Like, you guys need to start interrupting each other.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
a conversation with these guys needs less law and order, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, they have a. I mean, honestly, I think ideally, if they're all going to be in the same room, they should be in separate soundproof booths, so their volume could just be cut off instantly if they start talking when they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
That's the way you do it. That's the way you do it. Yeah.
At the very least, don't tell them that like they could just go nuts. Like, what are
Yeah,
you
please
doing?
jump in, interrupt, please. This is
Awesome.
too civil.
Say something here. I was there, and I was investigated and subpoenaed by the Justice Department in at least 5 criminal investigations, and I was forced to testify in front of the Jan 6 committee, which they've now been destroying their records because the records show the opposite of what they said. Trump and all of us had a stage rented by the Supreme Court. He was supposed to have another rally there. We showed up. Before Trump ever finished his speech, people were getting tear gas and hit by bullets. And there were a bunch of provocateurs leading an attack against the police, and they broke through. And then this 1 million+ people then got blamed as insurrectionists. And Biden gave a big speech yesterday saying they're all terrorists. So by that extension, Kamala Harris, as the VP candidate, was bailing people out of jail that burned down police stations and firebombed federal buildings. And the idea of Biden's speech yesterday, making his whole campaign about January 6th, saying political violence is never good. The Democrats are the ones that called for political violence. So I was there with a bullhorn. I could only reach 100 yards out when the tear gas was hitting me, saying, don't go in, don't fight the police. This is a setup. And then we have hundreds of videos. And so regardless of what the left tries to do, they're all out there of people taking off their Antifa stuff and putting on the Trump garb and the police fake arresting people, attacking them and then high-fiving them. I mean, this has all come out in the new footage, and it's all getting...
Wait, fake arresting them? How were they fake
They would grab them and arrest them and then drag them in and then high-five them, take the handcuffs off and high-five them. Those videos, what people are going to take everything I say, they're going to put it on X and show what I said. That's where we dominate.
Yeah,
and so what I'm getting at here, let me tell you this. What I'm getting at here is they now admit hundreds of federal officers were there. So when Trump started his speech, this whole thing began with Ray Epps saying, go into the Capitol. He told the Jan 6 committee, yeah, it's true. It's in his text messages. He told family, I orchestrated it. So under pressure, they finally indicted him, but only recommended 6 months. So a few hundred people got manipulated into fighting the police. They were led and driven by provocateurs and other groups. They were others. Then they opened the doors and the police wave them in hundreds of videos. They walk between the velvet ropes, and then they indict over 1,000 people that just walked through velvet ropes. And then now we're told in the National Security Directive of President Biden, the #1 threat is the American people. And he had a declaration of war yesterday against all Trump supporters and says to protect democracy, we're not going to let you vote for Trump. So as Stalin said, I care not who casts the votes, I care who counts them. Well, Biden doesn't care who casts the votes. He cares who's allowed on the ballot. So we've already won. No one's buying this. And when this happened 3 years ago, the Wall Street Journal had to print a retraction, but they said I was there as a coward telling people to attack. Well, no, they wouldn't let me put the video on Twitter where I was saying don't go in. But the truth is it's coming out. And so that's the bottom line here. And this attempt by Biden to cast the American people as the enemy in all these movies about martial law and civil war and race war, that's their only hope because the corrupt, evil Democratic Party and its evil twin, the Republicans, they've lost power and populism is rising. Quite frankly, this was not an insurrection. It was an insurrection that would have been guns. And it's in the Declaration of Independence that it's our right and duty to get rid of a government that's destructive of what the people want. But I'm not calling for violence. We're winning this politically, but we're being cast as about to be violent in the next 10 months because all these indictments and all these attacks to not let Americans vote for who they want aren't working and are backfiring. And all the big Democrat lawyers now admit it. Axelrod admits it. Carville admits it. They all admit this attempt, like we're in Venezuela or something, to take Trump off the ballot when he's never been convicted of insurrection. This is a military tribunal, U.S. code from the Civil War. If a military tribunal found you were guilty of being involved in insurrection, that meant after the war ended.
Can I ask you a question?
Run for office.
Alex, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So do you think the Confederates during the Civil War were partaking in insurrection?
I mean, in retrospect, because I wasn't alive then, I think the South got manipulated into that.
I was just thinking after that, like, psychotic gish gallop that we just heard of like every talking point that he could think of, all like melded together for 5 minutes. That whichever Krassenstein that was, I refused to figure out which one of them is which. That guy was making like the weakest possible objection, right? It was like, there's such a bad response, right? There's so many things you could have said here, but like, one, seems like Alex sort of anticipated it, right, at the end of what he was saying. Two, there are all kinds of obvious things he could say about like, oh, come on, are you gonna compare like a few hundred boomers, most of whom didn't have weapons with them, like rampaging around the Capitol, to like this actual army rising up in rebellion again. Like there's so many, like it was such a bad objection. There were so many good ways that Alex could have responded to it, but he's fucking Alex Jones. And instead of doing any of that, he just reaches towards the most insane possible.
Yeah, I know. Immediately, like, I had the same thought. I remember, like, just like, oh man, that's not even a good setup. And then of course Alex Jones is like, well, I don't think that. It's like I personally think they were baited into it. Like, what? Like, okay.
Yeah, no, it's like, oh, I'm not sure, I wasn't alive yet, but it seems like Gettysburg was a false flag.
Yeah, it's insane.
I thought there was real issues between the North and South. The abolitionists, had a good point, and slavery needed to end. But it was really about the North.
So just to be clear, the person that's defending the J6 rioters won't say that the Confederate States were engaged in insurrection.
Well, that's not what I see. Here's what happens. Hold on. That's not true.
That's what it sounded like you said. We can correct the record. So do you think they were engaged in insurrection?
To talk. And the thing I said was, I think the South was wrong. And then you just said that I support what the South did. No,
I didn't say you supported that. I said that you said that they weren't engaged in insurrection. Do you think the Confederate States were engaged in insurrection?
Was that because there were rebellions during Reconstruction at the end of the Civil War, and they were saying if you lead an uprising against the Northern occupation of the South, you're precluded from running from office, because they were worried about Southerners getting office again, like Jefferson. No, I do not support the Civil War or slavery, and I'm not a quote Confederate.
But was it an insurrection? My question is, was it an insurrection? Yes or no?
Yes, if you were, no. The law, yes, I think that it was a civil war, and you could say an insurrection.
Okay, so is it insurrection? Did anybody get charged with insurrection rebellion?
What I'm saying is,
with violating statute. Did anybody get charged?
Listening.
No, I'm asking you. You just said it was insurrection. Did anybody get charged with violating the insurrection and rebellion statute?
Yes, people did.
No, because there was no statute there. That's my point.
No,
you don't need to violate that statute in order to be partaking in insurrection, because the Civil War was an insurrection, and nobody got charged with violating that. That's what I'm saying. That's my point, Alex. You're changing the subject because you know it's correct.
Even the Democratic Party lawyers on CNN say you have to be convicted under the 14th Amendment of this before you can be. You can't just.
You don't get convicted under the 14th Amendment. You get convicted under Section 2383 of Title 18.
Well, let's slow down a little.
A congressional resolution to give awards to Capitol Police is not a conviction of Donald Trump to remove him from the ballot. He's been indicted for saying they stole an election. So now they want to take him off the ballot.
To be clear, he hasn't been indicted
which is pure stealing of an election.
I think
this is not. He's the Yankee. He's not somebody in Georgia. He's not Robert E. Lee. This has nothing to do with it.
But
also, as a quick fact check on the 14th Amendment, it doesn't require a conviction under Section 3. You can literally put it on the text on the screen. There's it does not say needs to be convicted.
I guess we need to define the difference. Alex, 1 second. We need to define the difference between the casual term insurrection and the legal definition of insurrection.
Yes.
Well, there's another thing we need to talk about. So yes, there's the casual term there's the etymology of the term insurrection, which simply suggests a rising up. So by that definition, that could encompass a wide range of things.
Black Lives Matter.
I think they never actually introduced this guy.
Oh yeah, they did. They did. Darren Beatty. That's what it was. Darren, not what did I say? I said Warren originally. Yeah, Darren.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I guess I just missed it because it's like I had a moment of being like, wait a second, what?
He's a speechwriter, or he's actually Trump's speechwriter apparently, and was a political theory professor at one point, or at least has a PhD in political theory. That's why I mentioned earlier, like that's why he kind of knows
I remember
Ronald
what you
Wiener.
said about him, right? But like my thought process was like I saw him, I was like, wait a second, who's he? There's another guy in this, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember Victor was talking about it earlier. But like at the beginning of the debate, because they were having people go around like to say who they were, did they ever do that with him?
I thought they did, but maybe they didn't. I feel like Alex Jones came in and was just like saying stuff about how he's like, oh, he's Trump's speechwriter, and he's working hard.
Alex introduced him, and all right, that's plausible. But this feels like the first time he's talked.
It does, yeah. Also, quick point, like it's kind of strange this argument being discussed because this one guy, and it's weird too, like as an overarching point, just seeing people kind of like battle where every response to one another is just like the worst response you could think of. But like, like this one guy's like, Alex Jones is like, well, how did they commit this crime if they didn't get convicted, if I'm hearing it correctly?
Yeah.
And then somebody else is like, well, there's the legal definition, but then there's like a more colloquial definition. But it's like, no, like even if we're using the legal definition, being convicted of the crime is not a prerequisite of like having committed it,
Yeah.
Like you can commit the crime under the legal definition and still not be like tried or convicted.
Yeah.
Right. Clearly. Right. Like that's yeah, no, that's yes, that's a horrible response. I mean, really the only part of this so far where I thought that, as much as I hate to hand it to them, I thought that whichever Krassenstein and Destiny were actually like making good relevant points, was the thing about how the 14th Amendment doesn't say anything about a conviction, and really the thing they were trying to get Alex to like answer. It's like, okay, do you at least count the Civil War as an insurrection? Which, by the way, is the funniest thing for him not to be willing to answer here, like for a lot of reasons, right? Not least that, like if we're interested in trying to figure out what the authors of the 14th Amendment meant by insurrection, this was the case they had in mind, right? When they were using that word, right? Like, so, like the intention of that clause was to stop former Confederates, from taking office again. So, so that like that just makes it a bizarre thing to like refuse to answer. But then also, it's just like even aside from that, I mean, it's like when you have people who are like forming armies and shooting at the U.S. Army. I mean, if that that's not an insurrection. I mean, whatever possibly could be, right? So like, and so what they were trying to push him on was like, okay, well, the former Confederates who were excluded originally didn't have to be convicted in a court of insurrection first, which is actually a good point, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the only good point I've heard so far from anybody, actually. But it's also really unclear what the issue under discussion is right now, because the question, right, for the moderator was, do you consider January 6th to be an insurrection? And it seems like we've sort of been talking about that, but like there's also been some mission creep to like, it really seems like what Alex wants to talk about is
everything.
Well, everything, right? But it's like, in particular, like, should Trump be kicked off the ballot in Colorado and whatever the other state is, when they're doing that? It's like, okay, that seems like a further question, right? I mean, it's like, seems like you should first, you should answer the first question first, and then you can argue about the other, the other one, right? But it just, but yeah, anyway. I guess it's not, maybe it's just obvious, but it does seem like he's having a lot of trouble sticking to the point.
Yeah.
Wait. So there's a rising up. Then there's the legal definition, but we have politically weaponized court systems. So that's not even, I think, a proper standard. I think the proper standard is the sweep of a proper historical perspective. Does the event of January 6th compare to the antecedent that we've been discussing, the Civil War? So if the question is,
yeah, this is how Alex Jones would have responded, like if he'd actually been interested in, just responded like you normally would to somebody making an argument. So I guess whatever. I guess that Beatty's PhD is good for something.
Is Civil War and insurrection? My question is the scope and scale of the event of January 6th comparable to the Civil War? Because Joe Biden has directly made this comparison, which I think is flatly ridiculous. And that comparison has to be valid in order for these ridiculous Section 3 arguments to have any force or legitimacy. And I think any common sense.
It's a lie. I'm going to shut up. It's a lie on its face. They say it's bigger than Pearl Harbor and 9/11. That is bull.
Okay, so here, let me finish what my point.
Yeah, do that, and then I want to go to Glenn for a second.
So my point is that two things: the Civil War was an insurrection. I think it's hard to argue that. Nobody got charged with a crime of violating the Insurrection and Rebellion Statute 2383. What about 1992, the LA riots? George Herbert Walker Bush, he invoked the Insurrection Act. 12,000 people were arrested. 63 people were killed. Hundreds were injured. Was that an insurrection? What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, it's a declaration of federal martial law.
But was it an insurrection? Because nobody there was charged with violating. Nobody there was charged with violating Section 2383, the Insurrection and Rebellion Statute. But we still consider that an insurrection.
I mean, by that yardstick, Kamala Harris bailing out people that firebomb federal buildings.
That is
Glenn,
not true.
Glenn, talk to me. You have something to say.
Yeah, I actually think what Destiny and what Ed are saying are very important. First of all, I was going to say that I think one of the problems with how these things are debated is that a lot of people these days have very binary prisms for understanding things. A lot of that comes from YouTube debate where you have to declare yourself on one side or the other. So Destiny said, oh, everybody either hates this insurrection, thinks it's an insurrection, or they deny it happens, or they think it's good. And there's so much middle ground. Namely that for me, this was a political protest that spilled over into a riot where a small minority of the people engaged in violence. I don't think we want to urge that to happen. We don't want to defend that. I consider that lamentable. But the fact that it's laughable to call this an insurrection is actually demonstrated by the examples that they're using. This was a 3-hour riot that was extremely easily subdued. It doesn't remotely compare to any prior insurrections, let alone to the Civil War. The only people who were killed on January 6th were 4 people, all 4 of whom were Trump supporters, 2 of whom dropped dead of a heart attack and 1 from a speed overdose, because these were not exactly a well-trained militia. And when Jack Smith went to charge Donald Trump with multiple crimes, he had a lot of options to charge him with, and he charged him with a lot of crimes, including very dubious ones. He did not charge him with inciting an insurrection for reasons that I think we ought to ask ourselves why. But the fact that this is such a minor event in history is demonstrated by the fact that the media, who needed this to be a major event, immediately started lying about what happened, saying that Brian Sicknick was murdered when he had his head bashed in through a fire with a fire extinguisher, only to learn that actually he called his mother that night. He was fine. He died the next day of what the coroner said were natural causes. Because the media knew that if you can't say that even one person supposedly perpetrating the insurrection killed anybody, pulled out a gun, let alone discharged the weapon, all of which is true, it's a joke to call this an insurrection. At best, it's a riot. And that's the reason why Trump hasn't been charged with an insurrection. The only time he ever commented on January 6th about whether he thought there should be violence or not was when he said the following. He said, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. He urged them to be peaceful in how they went there. To the extent there was violence, I think you can make the argument that the FBI informants that even the New York Times admits were there were the ones that urged it. But even if the people who were there were the ones responsible, at best, this is a riot. You could so easily make the case that the 2020 riots were a far greater insurrectionary threat than anything that happened on January 6th.
That's perfectly said. I would ask I would ask the left over here. I know Ian's asked the questions. I mean, I don't know. Did you guys see Biden's speech? I mean, it was an hour long that no one there was good. They were all there, over a million people. I was there. And then we marched down there to have another rally, and then I see this terrible thing happening. It was medieval, and then Biden saying they're all bad, and we can't let you vote for Trump. I mean, come on, man.
We have a clip from Biden's speech I want to play, and then let's get back to you, Destiny. You had something to say, but if you guys have this, it's clip number 4, Biden's speech. This is from yesterday's. It's only 50 seconds, but let's load this up. Not sure what
Trump's mob was a peaceful protest. It was a violent assault. They were insurrectionists, not patriots. They weren't there to uphold the Constitution. They were there to destroy the Constitution. Trump won't do what an American president must do. He refuses to denounce political violence. So hear me clearly. I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never.
Look at the Democrats.
It has no place in a democracy. None. You can't be pro-insurrectionist and pro-American. You know, Trump and his MAGA supporters not only embrace political violence, but they laugh about it.
The insurrection is the open border.
So the insurrection was not just the 3-hour riot that happened at the White House afterwards. I think that's the least charitable reading of everything that happened.
Okay, I feel like about 300 to 400 claims have been made since the last time we paused. Do you guys have any thoughts?
I mean, it's kind of, like one overarching thought is just presumably they should have had an agreed upon construal of what constitutes an insurrection before agreeing to debate it. Like, it's kind of unclear what they're supposed to be debating if they just all have different definitions in mind. Like, okay, you're not actually disagreeing. You're just asserting things about different, you're just asserting different compatible claims, but using the same word, Yeah,
but if they didn't necessarily have to agree on it, they could at least a moderator who was interested in clarity could have pressed people on how they're using the word, right?
Or just put a definition on the table and be like, how close was what happened to this, right? Even if they don't agree with it, just be like, here's a definition. How close was this to that? And yeah, it's one of those annoying things but it is funny, what Ethan's saying, that in so many of the debates, not just the shit show ones like this, but even the really formal ones, I feel like this is always a problem, defining the terms, even those monk debates that we've watched in the past that comes up, it's not just the shit show debates where that's a problem. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, this is I don't know how many additional substantive points have been made, even though there have been a lot of points back and forth, but I kind of think not that much, even though like you said 1,000 points have been made. I feel like not that much has advanced, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually think a lot of times stuff like the Mug debates or Oxford and Cambridge debates, some of those are good, but a lot of times that could actually be worse for what you're talking about, because there's a way that some of those really prestigious ones tend to do this thing where they have the weirdest, most vaguely defined questions, and it's they'll have a proposition that people are supposed to be debating, and it's are our dreams stronger than our fears or something. It's it just means fucking nothing, right? And then people just give little speeches that are based on whatever they got out of it. They're not even really arguing with each other.
Exactly. But I will say that one of the things that this makes when they start arguing about definitions, what's frustrating is you kind of know that the definition argument, the definition debate is really a proxy for what they all actually are trying to argue about, but doing it indirectly, which is basically is what happened on January 6th really bad? It's just or is it not a big deal, right? And then they're using this weird definitional argument as a proxy when that to me is maybe the more interesting question than just like, is it an insurrection? Like, is it something that is like a really significantly horrible thing that happened, or is it not a big deal and we should stop crying about it or something?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I'm in the strange position here where I do actually, I think he went off the rails at the end, but I do agree with a lot of what Glenn said on the way, right? You know, that and I, you know, so I think that it's like, you know, the problem with like insurrection is, you know, if it's supposed to be a legal term, right? And you take the actually good point that was made by Destiny and the Krassensteins. I'm just going to treat them as a collective entity. Like the actually good point, which was that, okay, in its original application after the Civil War, you know, it wasn't tied to being convicted of, under like insurrection statute that I think might not have even come until after the 14th Amendment anyway. Right. So, so if that's right, then, you know, as a legal term, it's actually, you know, up for grabs kind of, right? Like it's like I don't know. And even if we're using it more informally, if we're using it more informally, it's even more up for grabs, right? Like what you mean by it. It's a little bit funny because it's like there are words that there are much more familiar words that you could use, and people certainly have used to describe January 6th. And one of those was riot, which one of the things I disagree with Glenn about is he said at worst you could call it a riot. It's like, no, at least it was a riot, right? I mean, that's the minimum standard.
Yeah.
Call that. It was definitely a riot, right? But that's like riot is a familiar term. Coup is a familiar term. Insurrection is a word that I've basically never heard anybody use before January 6, 2020, right? Outside of maybe certain kinds of historical context, right? It's not really a word in active use.
One of the worst Star Trek movies was Star Trek Insurrection.
I remember that movie. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And it just seems like, okay, why are people dusting off this you know, their thesauruses and, you know, finding insurrection after January 6, 2021? And it seems like basically two reasons. One is they might already be thinking about like the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment. And two is that I think a lot of people had a sense that like riot was too weak, but coup maybe was too strong. And so they were kind of looking for, you know, they were looking for a label to slap on that, right? Like I think that you know, I think that the way that Darren Beatty, what he eventually said, right, like was the smart response to all the Civil War talk, right? Which is like, yeah, come on, it's like you know, I guess Glenn might have said this eventually, but it's like nobody so much as, you know, the only person who discharged a firearm during the whole thing, right, was a cop, right, who shot one of the rioters. So there was never any attempt to by any of the rioters to, you know, to kill anybody. Some of the initial evidence, which actually I repeated this in what I wrote about it at the time, because like everybody, this was like all over the mainstream media at the time, but like some of the initial evidence that like pointed towards people, you know, some people having an intention to kidnap people turned out to be a little bit misleading, you know, as it's been too long, I don't remember, but it's like the thing that not like a handcuff, but like the things, you know, zip ties. Thank you. Yeah. The zip ties, right? That if you actually go and read the eventual indictments, the guy with the zip ties in the picture, who is not like a, you know, who is not like a, I don't know, globetrotting mercenary, you know, who, you know, who's like a bartender. He was actually at the protest with his mom. And he found, and those were zip ties that had been like abandoned by some cops, right? He like picked them up and, you know, put them on or whatever. And I don't, you know, so it's not the kind of kidnapping plot thing probably isn't true. But and yeah, the cop Brian Sicknick, who was originally reported, like that was the narrative for a long time, right? That he had died from his injuries, and that turned out not to be true. He died. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think that the stress from doing crowd control during a really like scary, violent riot, definitely contributed, right? But he actually died of a heart attack. So I'm, like all of which is to say, like, I think that, I think a lot of the ways that it was talked about are overblown, and I'm not, I do worry that the sort of insurrection narrative, I do worry about the way that could be deployed to sort of strengthen the national security state, make it like easier to arrest people, and have easier to shut down protests, right? Like I saw it being invoked by like some Democratic politician about some pro-Palestinian protesters at his office a couple weeks ago. It's like, can you believe on the anniversary of January 6th, these people are trying to storm a government building? I think if you think back to like Wisconsin, right, the protests there, right, I think we certainly want to be careful about how much we're going to sort of treat breaching where you're allowed to go in a public building as like with this kind of language, but where I also, though, disagree with Glenn is the one thing I already said, right? I think at worst it's a riot. I think gets it backwards. I think at the least it's a riot. And two, I think when he says, oh, the only thing that Trump said about whether people should do violence is that they shouldn't do violence. Yeah, that's a little bit misleading, right? It's like, it's true that he did say that. It's true that he never said, yes, go do violence, right? But there's also, he had been propagating this narrative where that would certainly, like, my God, if he was right about all this, right? It's like, yeah, why not do violence, right? Restore democracy. And he was kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth on the day of, right, about, he seemed to be, whipping them up and encouraging them. And yeah, he said to go home, although he seems to have really dragged his feet on saying that. Like, there are reports that came out during the hearings that he was initially kind of excited when it happened, and like, was really kind of pulling teeth to get him to like, eventually I think the winning argument was, no, these people are like embarrassing you. And that was what got him to be like, okay, I'm going to go on TV and tell him to go home. But, so like, I think he's underplaying the Trump role. That's the second point. But I think the most significant thing that is, well, I think probably what Destiny's about to say, right? That because the last thing he said before he paused was essentially, yeah, this riot on January 6th, in a way, was kind of the least of it in terms of Trump's attempts to overturn the election. I think that's totally right. Yeah. Like, he did make a sustained attempt to overturn the results of a democratic election. In some ways, I think January 6th was this kind of, that was like the last gasp of that attempt, right? Everything else failed. Even all of the judges he'd appointed had like thrown his like nonsense lawsuits out of court. The military certainly wasn't going to come to his rescue. Even his own vice president wasn't going to do what he wanted. And but the point is, he did try these avenues, right? Like he was making these sustained attempts to do this. And like we talked about when we covered the Crystal and Kyle debate with Michael Tracy about the indictments, it's not even just that he filed a bunch of frivolous lawsuits, and it's not even just that he made a bunch of like outrageously false public statements. Like, he really did do stuff that like wanders into territory that's like, no, at this point we're really talking about like a criminal conspiracy overturn an election, like the slates of fake electors, So whatever you think of the riot, I think that the stuff that I suspect Destiny is about to get into is like actually, to me, the much bigger deal than like, okay, a few hundred like internet addled boomers, some of whom are, doing things that were like really bad and violent and, deserve to have the book thrown at them, right? Others of whom, but like all of whom pretty much did have the book thrown at them, right? Like they, like I think the Q shaman, I think got a couple of years in prison, right? Like so that's like kind of the least of it, right? Like I think that like the thing, if you want to sort of throw around coup language, then I think it, what it sort of fits better is that overall attempt that this was just kind of the last, okay, everything else failed. Maybe I could like incite these yahoos to, do this. And then it's even that it's like really unclear what would have counted as like what would it have even looked like for these guys to win, right? Like how would that put out?
I guess it would have successfully pressured Mike Pence to like try to throw out the votes and like declare it, and that would like delay things a little bit, I guess. But just real quick on the point about insurrection versus coup versus like riot. I think, like my understanding is like insurrection is like an attempt to rise up against the government or something like that, against the authority of the government, and like. But then the question of like whether it's successful or not is kind of like not included in it, right? So like insurrections could be, and then a coup, obviously, like so you in a way like you need an insurrection for a coup to happen, but obviously like coups are only coups if they're successful, right? Like so there's like so I guess, although like, the attempt.
Even there, right? We talk about attempted coups, like Venezuela in 2002. That's like an attempted coup, right? The generals like arrest up, like all of the, cabinet ministers and go on TV and declare it or whatever, then it doesn't work, right? Like they couldn't like actually seize power, right? But like they tried to. It's an attempted coup. And this, this doesn't really seem like it rises to that level. I mean, it's a, I don't know. It almost seems like we need a weaker word than attempted, like
it's true.
Like a wannabe coup.
Yeah, wannabe. But I'm sure that like if the military had said to Trump, "Hey, like we'll declare martial law, like are you down?" He probably would have been like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Oh, totally. Yeah, no question whatsoever. I remember at the time, credit where credit's due. It's good lines from Matt Taibbi. He said like, "Look, it's not like I think that Trump would be morally above doing a coup. Of course he would do a coup. It's just that in the first 5 minutes of talking to his generals about the plan, he would get bored and wander off to watch TV."
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, totally. If like some generals had offered to like step in and like, declare him the real victor of the election and do martial law and dissolve Congress or whatever, I absolutely think Trump would have gone for it, right? Like I think he would, I just think that like there's really no scenario in which that would have happened because like that really like wouldn't be in their interest.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think just like one final point on like the coup, like the kind of semantic thing. I mean, it's just kind of like, like there's just been so much talk already about like, oh, are we talking about the legal definition or the colloquial definition? Like, I think like the way I would have like rather see this conversation go is just like, okay, like an insurrection is like an unlawful violent uprising against the government of some sort. Obviously, any violent uprising against the government doesn't qualify as an insurrection. So like there's some threshold of severity past which it becomes an insurrection. So some people think that January 6th, is above that threshold. Some people think it falls below the threshold. And like presumably that's at least in part because of factual disagreements about what happened on January 6th. So like let's discuss those and see who's right about the factual disputes, rather than this like, let's explore the various different ways we could use the term. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean in general, this is a horribly structured debate. Like, like if for some reason you're going to invite all of these people at the same time, to which, anyway. But if you are right, like presumably you want like a really active moderator who's like really going to keep the discussion flowing through the channels, being like, okay, we'll talk about that later, but right now the question is,
You don't think the workaholics lookalike is gonna do that properly?
yeah, no comment. All right.
And that's not, if you read any of the charges that either Jack Smith or the Georgia RICO case has alleged against Trump, are saying that, in fact, not much of the focus is on the 3-hour riot at all. Not much of that.
Hold on, Alex. Let Stephen finish his thought first.
So not much of those indictments are actually focusing on the 3-hour riot itself. The unprecedented act that there is no answer for, that Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton have not engaged in, is using knowingly false election claims for months to try to pressure state electors to change their vote. And then when they wouldn't do that, beg them to elect different electors. And then when they wouldn't do that, create a plot to create fake electors. And then when Pence wouldn't accept that, try to capitalize on that final 3-hour riot at the Capitol building to also make phone calls and tell people to decertify their vote or to switch their electors.
JFK and Obama had alternate electors.
JFK.
No, they didn't.
JFK's
No, they
story
didn't.
was completely
No, they
different.
didn't.
I can explain that if you want.
Yeah, please do.
Right.
Yeah. So in 1960. So in 1960, JFK and Nixon, there was a dispute because there was a recount. I think JFK ended up winning by like 150 votes. At the time, each state decided to certify two sets of electors. Or decided to choose two different slates of electors.
Depending on how it went.
But they were certified by the
middle of a recount. They were in the middle of a recount.
Well, Trump tried to get it certified.
None was certified yet. Neither slate was.
What happened with Trump was that Trump tried to get the states to certify a second slate of electors based off of conspiracy theory crap that
none of the
election was stolen. Hold on.
They did.
He took it to court. 62 cases.
That's not
30
true.
cases were looked at on merit.
So are they
They're
taking
all
him
shut
off the
down.
ballot now?
That's a separate.
That's a separate.
Take him off the ballot. Is a separate.
Is the not purest form of election theft is taking someone off the ballot?
Alex, let's get back to the 1960s really fast. So what happened was that they did a recount, and Kennedy ended up winning by, I think, 150 votes, and they chose the Kennedy electors. They certified the Kennedy electors, and Kennedy ended up winning that state.
And that's what Trump said.
What Trump did was Trump tried to get the states to certify an alternate slate of electors. They refused because the court said there's no there there. And then when that didn't go through, Trump decided to get his own slate of electors above the states that were not certified and tried to use that to force Mike Pence to say that Joe Biden didn't win these electoral votes.
I just need to interject really quickly. So if we want to be precise in terms of the scope of the debate, I think it's about January 6th. And so the lead up to it might be relevant to some of the criminal indictments, but it's technically speaking outside the scope of the January 6th discussion. But if we're going to bring it into the discussion, I think there's an operative word there, knowingly. And that's operative within the context of the charging documents. But the idea that Trump thought that he lost the election and he was knowingly lying and knowingly engaging. No, he believes, I guarantee it, whether you believe it or not, Trump believes that the election was stolen and he was using the legal recourses.
I don't know that he should guarantee that. I actually think, unless I'm very mistaken about this, I mean, I couldn't click, but I'm pretty sure that there's been a good amount of testimony, right, from people in the White House that indicates that, indicates otherwise, right? I mean, like, I'm sure Donald Trump is capable of all kinds of feats of cognitive dissonance and whatnot, but like he has, but like there does seem to be some like pretty good evidence that he knew that a lot of what he was saying was bullshit.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I also saw a super chat from Quintessential. Thank you. You ever met an analytic philosopher who voted for Trump?
I think I have.
I know like a couple.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I was just thinking about it, and like Tim McGrew, who taught at the department where I got my master's at Western Michigan, I have not talked to that man in like, I don't even know, like 16 years. Right. So I have no idea, but it's like, he's somebody I could imagine voting for Trump. You know, I mean, he was definitely a very conservative guy and whatever. Like, I actually have trouble thinking of cases that I know for sure, just because like part of the problem is that in my experience, at least, most right wingers who do analytic philosophy aren't really conservatives; they're libertarians.
Yes,
and a lot of
exactly.
those people didn't vote for Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Most of them didn't vote for Trump, and like, it's funny that I mean, it's correct for them to qualify and say any analytic philosophers, because I do think there's probably some continental philosophers who, whatever, you know, however we're defining that, who are much more likely to have voted for Trump. Like,
Yeah, I mean, look, it'd be very unsurprising if there was a overlap between people who get like really excited about Heidegger and
Yeah.
people who vote for Trump.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna
exactly.
say somebody said Heidegger would have voted for Trump, but I actually think Trump might like Jews like a little bit too much for Heidegger to have voted for him.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, the 2016 Black Notebooks would all be about Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
If I were to guess, probably a good amount of like theist philosophers of religion that I know are conservative. Like Christian philosophers of religion probably is disproportionately conservative. Like I would guess like a William Lane Craig or something is probably right wing.
But they still don't like Trump, I don't think, most of them.
Yeah, that seems
That might be
right.
true. Well, they're probably I'm guessing a lot of them are like, I don't like Trump's character, but like I'll still vote for him over
Yeah,
Biden.
they'll kind of
thing.
they'll hold their nose. And also, like, I mean, with what happened with Roe, I'm sure some of them, if like abortion is like for the philosophers of religion,
Yeah.
if that's like a huge issue for them, I'm sure they're like, well, it was worth it to hold their nose and vote for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that you're right, Ethan. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, Tim McGrew, who I mentioned, is like definitely in that category. And as I was saying it, I was kind of thinking about some people who were graduate students I knew back then who were like McGrew fans who, like, I could, again, it's not out of the question, right? Like, if anybody's gonna like some of those people, it's like, okay, if anybody would like hold out and be like one of the 3 never Trump Republicans who actually didn't vote for him in 2020, you know, it might actually be one or two of those guys. But like, I would be unsurprised if there were some Trump votes there. Like, in general, if you're like, you know, I don't know. I mean, if you're acculturated into American evangelical Christianity, then yeah, I mean, you probably, you know, white evangelical Christianity, right? You probably voted for Trump. Like there is, you know, and in fact, there's been this really interesting transformation where, yeah, I mean, like in 2016, there was a lot of, well, I don't like his character, but right. And by 2020, a lot of those people would even kind of leave out the first part, or they sort of say things that acknowledged it, but like, you know, you could tell they were really into him. Right?
Yeah, like I don't like what he's saying, but someone needed to say it, you know.
yeah. And they have they even have like these biblical justifications. It's like the Sirius or whoever he is, right? The king or emperor, you know, who you know, let the ancient Israelites back, you know, that's like he's like he's a bad, you know, he's a heathen, but he's like still an instrument of God, you know,
Yeah.
giving us our Federalist Society judges. Okay, so I'm talking myself into being a more common phenomenon than I thought it was when I just started to answer the questions. Like, you know, basically, like, yeah. Did anybody vote? Did anybody I know at Rutgers vote for Trump? I seriously doubt it. Because like the few who were like right wingers were like libertarians who probably would vote for Trump. Anybody I knew at Western Michigan vote for Trump? Yeah, probably. Right? Probably a few of those people did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm even thinking about them more because, like, I'm in the political science department where there's like some history of Straussianism, you know, and I'm pretty sure even the people who are sympathetic to Strauss, maybe like one of them I can think of would have been interested in voting for Trump if they could. I mean, a lot of them were Canadians, but some of them weren't. Some of them were Americans. But probably most of them would not have voted for Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, the most right-wing person I knew in my doctoral program was actually the person I mentioned to you off air before we started, and who also could not have voted because he wasn't a citizen. But I feel pretty confident that he would have. I mean, if he didn't vote for Trump, it would have been for some weird aesthetic reason. That like it wouldn't have been like politics and morality.
Available to him at the advice of his legal advisors.
That is not true. Most of his legal advisors said that this idea was crazy.
Well, no, but he had legal advisors who were telling him.
If you search hard enough, you can find anybody to validate an opinion. But what you've just done is what I opened with, which is saying he thought the election was stolen, therefore he was justified to engage in insurrection.
But is it right to take him off the ballot? Since you don't want to debate January 6th,
that's for the Supreme Court to decide. That's for the Supreme Court to decide. I'm asking a question. I'm telling you, that's for the Supreme Court to decide. According to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it's
why does the United States sanction countries that take people off the ballot?
What? That's not even remotely relevant here.
Oh, okay, all right. So
you know what the United States we usually
we have
independence. If we do want insurrection, you know it.
It would probably be for things like circumventing the vote, like asking the vice president, for instance, to unilaterally win the election. So that would be something that we might sanction another country for.
You can't vote for somebody because they make up a bunch of stuff and he's not found guilty anywhere, but you guys just parrot it over. You're like,
if you don't like the Constitution, that's your fault, Alex. If you don't like the Constitution, that's on you. Really? Then why are you saying that Section 3 of Amendment 14 requires a conviction? Alex, why did you say that Section 3 of Amendment 14 requires a conviction? Can we put the text on stream?
I would love to do that, actually.
Put the text up.
And Glenn,
because you keep saying
all right, guys.
Military tribunals.
I don't care what
they would have to find you guilty.
Let's.
That's why no one was.
Put up Amendment 14.
Let's hear from Glenn.
We'll slow down. This is a great conversation. Glenn's about to drop some knowledge.
I'm dominating.
Yeah.
You're just talking a lot.
Glenn's in remote from Brazil. So Glenn, anytime you have something to say, it's helpful for me if I see a visual cue. Maybe your hand goes up. I can tell you have something you're going to say now. But let us know.
Let me just say, what happens is when you gather together to debate a particular question, you're supposed to debate that particular question. The particular question that we were presented with is we're going to debate January 6th and whether it was an insurrection. Now, I don't blame Destiny and Ed for not wanting to debate that, for wanting to debate a whole set of other issues about whether Trump acted improperly, whether he was naughty and the things he did after the election, because there is no argument to make that what happened on January 6th rises to the level of insurrection. And that's why an extremely aggressive prosecutor named Jack Smith decided not to charge Donald Trump with that crime because he knew there was no way that he could possibly bring a conviction against anybody, let alone Donald Trump, who told everybody to be peaceful when going to the Capitol, about whether or not that was actually an insurrection, whether that rose to that level. And even in a colloquial sense, what we've called an insurrection in the past is in a completely different universe. But on the issue of whether there was a real belief on the part of Donald Trump that elections were stolen, I don't understand how anybody could doubt that, aside from the fact that you have to get into Trump's head. In the last 3 elections that Democrats lost, in 2000, 2004, and 2016, a very large number of Democrats believed and asserted that the election was stolen and was the byproduct of fraud, and the president was, as a result, illegitimate. When I started writing about politics in 2005, the idea that George Bush was the real loser of the election, Al Gore won, was the view of every single liberal and Democrat that I knew. In 2004, there were objections claiming that Karl Rove had interfered in the Ohio vote with the Diebold machines and cheated to make John Kerry lose and George Bush win. And then in 2016, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats said that Donald Trump was the illegitimate winner, that Russia had helped him, and they tried to convince the Electoral College to abandon the certified results of the state. Obviously, you go back to 1960.
Okay. I do have other stuff to say, but I just want to say one really quick, but I think really significant factual correction of what Glenn just said. I mean, look, if anybody has any information to the contrary here, please stick it in the chat because I would be fascinated to see it. But I really don't think Hillary Clinton urged the Electoral College not to certify the result of the election, right?
Yeah.
There were liberals who did. There was this thing called the Hamilton electors that they got some celebrities to endorse it. I think they might have taken out an ad right? The
Yeah.
newspaper, but that was a real thing. But I knew people who supported that. I argued with them about it at the time, right? But like Hillary Clinton never said that, right? Like nobody, not only did she not, right, which is what you need to even get in the ballpark of a comparison to what Trump did, right? But like nobody approaching her level did. Like nobody, like it's not like Tim Kaine, right? So like urged the Electoral College to do that, or I think like Martin Sheen did, right? But like there's no, but like Hillary Clinton made no attempt to do anything like that, right? And even that, right, would have been like there's like as bad as that would have been if she had, right? Like and it would have been, right? But it's like as bad as it would have been if she had, like even that's nothing like, conspiring to submit fake, like slates of fake electors or, anything like that. Right. I mean, that's all in a totally different, universe.
Yeah.
So, like, I think, cause it's like the rest of what he said leading up to that is true. I think I would argue that the sort of some of the analogies he's tried to draw are unconvincing. Right. But it's like that last part is like really importantly not true.
No, I also just didn't really like the move that he made to be like, oh, that's not what we're arguing about, right? And then he's like, so they're not really like on the point of the debate. So apparently it has to be limited to what happened on January 6th. Like, I thought I didn't like that move because it makes me just feel like he doesn't want to concede. And then immediately he's like, well, we're not going to debate that. And then he goes to kind of like a whataboutism about all these things that I agree are just like not really comparable. And, as whatever you think about the 2000 election, the recount, I mean, last I checked, I looked into this once. Like, I'm pretty sure they went back and looked. And if you actually would have done a full recount, Gore would have won. Although what is true is that specific recount that was, I think, limited to certain districts in Florida, if they had allowed that to continue, it wouldn't have changed the results.
Yeah,
but if they had done a statewide
recount that the Supreme Court stopped, like those,
wouldn't have made a difference. Wouldn't have made a difference.
Although,
but if he did a full statewide recount, Gore would have won.
And presumably, in the recount they were asking for, they would have found enough votes to be like, well, hell, let's do the whole thing, right? I don't know if they would have been able to or not, right? That never had a chance to get hashed out, but yeah, absolutely. Like I think that like, okay, so I think because there are really two issues here, right? One is saying that elections were stolen, and he's certainly right that there are instances in which liberals have said that, right? But then the second issue is, well, is that true? And if not, right, to the people who are saying it, no, it wasn't true. And then like the third issue is, did they just say it or did they try to do anything? Right? Like that's
exactly.
And those are all really different issues from each other. It's like, yeah, there are definitely times that liberals and Democrats said elections were stolen. In the case of 2000, they were correct. It was. Right.
And even in 2000, though, I still remember because I remember watching Bowling for, or maybe it was Bowling for Columbine or Fahrenheit 9/11.
Oh yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And there's a clip, and you can see Gore, and what does he say? Like when because he was also obviously vice president, so he's like in the Senate when they're certifying the votes for George W. Bush to be president. I think he says something like, because some people in the Senate were sort of protesting it, and he actually told them, he's like, look, I disagree with what the Supreme Court decided, but I accept it. And he has a whole thing about accepting the peaceful transfer of power, which is like, so why are you bringing that up? Like, it's not even close to equivalent because nobody took steps. It's like some liberals just and he said, he's like, I disagree with the Supreme Court's decision, but he accepts it, right? It's nothing like what Trump was doing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ben kind of already touched on this, but like the point about Hillary Clinton is just like bad to the point of like, I can't imagine somebody saying this like not in bad faith, if they were paying attention to like the aftermath of that election. Like Hillary Clinton literally, like, I think she said the election was illegitimate a couple times and then like conceded the election like the day after and then just like whined about sexism on Hulu or something. Well, like that is just like not even remotely equivalent to like trying to, through various legal avenues, like overturn the results of the election, and then like encouraging your supporters to like storm the Capitol.
And not just legal avenues, extra legal avenues, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, both. Yes, exactly. And yeah, I mean, nobody like like the equivalent. It's like, okay, on the one hand, I think that like all of the, the years long liberal obsession with, with Russian interference, I think was like embarrassing and, mostly based on a flawed premise or whatever, right? Like, that's the, I don't really think that the, like, $100,000 or whatever that was spent on like farcically bad Facebook ads, by Russians, had any impact whatsoever on the, certainly not in the top 10, even probably foreign countries trying to exert influence on that election. So like, I agree with the substance of the critique there, but it's also not the same at all, right? Because it's like, I'm not, because it's like, if you say, that there was this illegitimate thing that happened that influenced the outcome of the election, that's not the same as saying that like I don't think that more people cast votes for this guy, and that like or I mean in that case they actually did it because he just won the electoral college, but whatever, you know what I mean, right? Like I don't, I think the actual legal outcome was wrong, right? Like that's not it at all. In fact, like what it would be is the pretty exact equivalent of something that like some conservatives say about the 2020 election, like ones who are kind of trying to like hedge their bets or have it both ways. Like Emily, some Eastern European last name I'm gonna get wrong, in the show on Breaking Points. It's not Breaking Points. She's like the conservative who co-hosts with Ryan Grimm. But like I think I've seen her say things like this. It's like, well, I think more people voted for Joe Biden, but like I do think, it's like illegitimate in the sense of, right, that like there was the attempt to like suppress like the Hunter Biden story and blah blah blah, right? It's like that's like that would be the equivalent of like saying it was like illegitimate in the sense of like Russiagate, right? Like that's not saying that like the actual legal outcome is not what it should have been, right? You're saying that you think illegitimate stuff happened that that influenced it. So yeah, I think these analogies are really flawed, right? Like that that it's like, yes, you're right. If you were going to say it's like absolutely a sin to like ever say that an election in any sense was illegitimate, that would be a really hypocritical thing for liberals to say. But also, I think that's not like, that doesn't even touch the objections to what Trump and his supporters did after the 2020 election. And also, by the way, like, I don't know, this is something I hate so much about so much punditry and political discourse in, 2024, that like there's so much fucking focus on who's being hypocritical about what. And it's like, I don't, people just get lost in this. It's like, I don't like, maybe you could just stop talking about like whether your enemies have a right to say such and such, because like really they're being hypocrites. It's like, just talk about what you think is actually true, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like, do you think it's okay to say that like an election was stolen sometimes? Okay, if so, do you think it's okay to like conspire to like submit slates of fake electors or get, the vice president to not, like those are the issues that actually like matter in all of this. I mean, just the sort of like hypocrisy hunting I get really, really tired of.
It's boring. Yeah. We should continue though.
Yes, we certainly should. That was like a Alex Jones length thing I just said. So.
And there's a lot of historians believe that election was stolen. So it's not like Donald Trump was the first person to ever wonder or believe that an election was stolen from him. It's a very significant tradition in American political history, if you know anything about politics before 2016. And if Trump believed that the election was stolen, and while it's true, a lot of people in the Justice Department and a lot of people in the White House told them they didn't think it was, he did have advisors and lawyers telling him that they think there was evidence of it, then the question is over, even on these other issues about whether or not Trump engaged in some conspiracy against the United States. But the issue is January 6th an insurrection?
Well, that's right. But I mean, Glenn, since
Well,
they've...
hold on, let's respond to Glenn.
Destiny, and these guys haven't talked to neither is Professor Beatty. Hillary was in videos 2 days ago saying Trump's going to steal this election. So why are they allowed to say it? It's free speech. You don't get indicted for it.
Trump didn't get indicted for that.
Oh my God. They indicted him and they put it in the charging thing in Georgia saying he says the election. You're hoping people don't read the documents.
You can go read it. It's a RICO case. There's a bunch of behavior that is within a RICO case.
Oh my God.
It's itself illegal. That's the point of a RICO case.
Yeah, right.
Can I talk about the differences? So Bush versus Gore, what happens? The Supreme Court ruled and Gore conceded. He stopped saying this election was stolen. He stopped saying I won.
That was Supreme Court.
Yes.
Did Gore refuse to certify the vote? I don't remember. Did he do that?
The vote was certified.
He didn't have an alternate slate of electors?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
after Trump wanted a Supreme Court hearing. Trump wanted the same thing.
62 cases were brought before judges. And you said earlier, none of them are based on evidence. 6 of them were based on standing. 6 out of the 62.
They wouldn't even hear it. I saw
Do you know
it.
how many of them were Trump-appointed judges that made those rulings? 17.
So six of them. Let me finish here. 6 of them were based on standing. 4 of those that were based on standing, the judge also analyzed the merits and said there was no evidence or insufficient evidence. So only 2 of them, and that was Texas versus Pennsylvania and Gomert versus Pence. Do you know what those 2 cases were?
No,
Texas.
I know what the cases are.
Texas tried suing.
No, I agree with you. Biden says inflation's fine right now. I agree with him.
Let me finish. Texas tried suing Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, several other states, saying that the election was stolen. And the judge said, no, Texas can't sue these other states. Somebody in that state who was affected had to sue them. Now, the other case was Gomert versus Pence. He challenged the Electoral Counts Act of 1807, saying that Pence could overturn the election. He said that Pence
I think that's wrong. I agree with you. I think that was a wrong legal
those
theory.
are only 2 that were based
I agree with you on that. So, but what I'm saying is, then if Biden's going to win so big, why can't Trump be on the ballot?
That's not up for Biden to decide. That's up for the Supreme Court to
Biden
decide.
said he wants him off the ballot.
It doesn't matter what Biden says.
Oh,
Biden's not the one who decides that.
Trump lost. That's why he can't have his race car on the track. This horse is going to lose, so it can't be in the race. Bull crap.
Who do you think has the authority then to determine the interpretation of Amendment 14?
Man, I know the State Department.
Why can't you answer a single question? Why not just answer one question? I'm just asking a simple question. Who has the authority ultimately to decide it?
Has not.
The president has the authority to decide on CNN, matters of constitution.
You don't let me talk.
Because you want to answer the question.
The president has not been
going to ramble. He's not going to
even on CNN, the legal analysts say that you have to be convicted. So, Destiny, you can sit there and have blue hair and be trending
right now.
and make all these, like, the moon is made of cheese. I'm Destiny.
Does the word convicted?
Every American knows you don't lose your rights when you're not convicted. He's not been convicted. And here's the good news. It's backfiring. People, we have the Declaration of Independence, and we can vote for who we want to.
No, you can't.
Well,
you can't vote for people under 35.
You can't vote for
non-citizens.
But
can you?
Nobody stole an election.
Can you
but
vote
you
for
can't vote for who you want.
Can you vote for
Nobody stole an election. But you can't vote for who you want.
I think
Nobody stole an election. But you can't vote for who you want.
We just beat this into the ground. Alex, I need you. We just crushed this one into the ground, but I want to ask the question in a slightly different way. Was this an attempted coup? Do you guys think this was an attempted coup?
Of course it was. Obviously it was.
The Hunter Biden laptop.
Oh my God.
The weaponization hearings.
Emails,
the censorship.
Russia.
There's no Russian connection. That's all.
mRNA vaccines.
Take your extra. I want you to take all the shots.
Global warming.
How many shots have you had?
None yet. You want to take some?
No, I hope you take them all.
I just want you to answer one question about any of this.
I want to see you take them all.
I think we've talked about the Democrats more than the Republicans on the January 6th debate. Isn't that wild?
Wait.
Isn't that crazy?
They now admit that the shot erases your immune system and doesn't protect you. So you do that little one-liner there.
Democrats trying to take away my Democrat.
Yeah. Let's stay back.
I really just want to note here that that both Glenn and Darren debater number 4. Yes, Darren Beatty both objected to bringing up Trump's larger attempt to overturn the election as near relevance to this January 6th discussion, and Alex's after it was bad enough he kept trying to change the subject whether Trump should be taken off the ballot, but now it's the vaccine out of nowhere.
I mean, like I said, there's going to be a lot of moments in this debate where you're going to be like, could the adults just be allowed to talk, please?
This is kind of a completely unrelated comment, but after spending so much time being mad at Destiny about Israel Palestine, it's kind of jarring to see him in a conversation where he's clearly the most reasonable one again.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I feel that. All right.
All right, guys, back to topic. Darren.
Brian has an answer. So is it a coup? That's the question.
Yeah, that's
I think it can be debated.
Or an
that
attempted
was
coup.
A coup.
An attempted coup.
Definitely, I would say it's an attempted coup. And a federal
The coup is flooding the border with aliens.
District Judge, U.S. District Judge David Carter actually evaluated the Trump Eastman scheme. And he said,
all right, we got some big news. I'm not interrupting you.
No.
Hours after.
Not that yet. But we had Glenn. Glenn's going to speak after you were.
I'm sorry. I'll shut up now.
So the federal judge, U.S. District Judge David Carter, evaluated the Trump Eastman scheme.
Another lawyer.
Which we can go into later. But basically, he said that it was quote a coup in search of a legal theory. This is a federal judge. So a judge.
We have a CIA coup over America. Hey, the CIA killed Kennedy.
Judges aren't part of the CIA.
Oh my God!
I don't think so.
Is that something? Is that a new theory of yours?
No, it's not a new theory of mine. No, the whole thing is a big rotten.
All right, guys. Did the CIA kill Kennedy?
It's amazing how
you haven't answered yet. You probably got the COVID shot.
Yeah. It's crazy how manic he is.
It really is.
He's like, "I'll shut up now," and then he comes in. He's like, "COVID shots."
Yeah, 5 seconds after saying, "I'll shut up now."
He's like, "I'll shut up." COVID shots.
Yeah, and it's even undermining how. I mean, in a way, it makes it funnier, but it's I really wanted him to start explaining the connection between the judges and the CIA. The judge in his divorce court was part of the CIA. That's this is the kind of content I want from Alex.
Yeah. I told you it would be fun.
So they can find partisan. They found the Secretary of State of Maine took Trump off the ballot because she had one hearing in a YouTube video. Are we ruled by this lady? Can we not vote for who we want?
So one of the I guess defenses against it being a coup.
Oh wait, here we've got Glenn. Glenn speaking. Go for it, man.
I actually want to ask a question that I would love to hear everybody's answer to. But before I do that, just want to say about federal judges. This year, in the last 6 months, 4 different federal judges, a district court judge, and then an appellate court unanimously found that the Biden administration gravely violated the First Amendment. In fact, the greatest assault on free speech, the court said, in decades, maybe the history of the judiciary, by systemically pressuring big tech to censor the internet and purge it of all dissent by threatening big tech companies using the CIA, the FBI, and the CDC with punishment if they didn't censor the internet. Now, you may not agree, but according to your standard, 4 different federal judges concluded that, which is infinitely worse in terms of an abridgment of freedom or an attack on the Constitution than anything that Trump is accused of doing.
That's not true. That's
a digital insurrection by the deep state. Digital insurrection.
Can I put a pin
on right,
thing real quick? I just want it to be noted.
Hold up, everybody, hold up. Glenn, please finish your point, and then we're going to move on to the response.
The question I want to ask is the question that you asked, Ian, is this a coup? If you look at how other coups are perpetrated, and I think a lot of this is that if you're an American and you have this very soft history, you don't know what a coup is. You think that what CNN tells you a coup is a coup. Usually the way coups work is the leader of the country or whoever is in charge of the military orders the military to seize control of the levers of power. Trump was the commander-in-chief on January 6th. The military was duty-bound to obey his orders. They had a right to disobey if they were illegal, but if this were a coup, why didn't Trump order the military to seize control of the power and turn over the election process to him? Why didn't he order the armed factions that form the law enforcement part of the military and the executive branch that serve under his command to do that as well? That's what happens in a coup. That didn't happen here because Trump wasn't trying to perpetrate a coup.
He wanted the Department of Defense to seize voting machines, and the DOJ turned him down and told
Well,
him.
the worst thing he did was try to take Biden off the ballot. Remember when Trump said Biden cannot run and have the Justice Department take Biden off the ballot? Oh, God, that was Biden. Sorry. I'm sorry. I was having a moment there.
To reiterate, also, Biden doesn't have the authority to do that. He still doesn't have
Only
the
his Lord
authority
and
to do
Savior
that.
Jack Smith.
The Supreme Court that Trump has his picks on, that's currently 6-3 conservative, they're the ones who are going to make the final decision on that. I wanted to be known that every single time you try to talk about any of the stuff related to Trump, it's so many Democrat names that comes out of people's mouths. I don't know why people can't just engage on the facts of what happened on and in the events leading up to June 6th and insurrection without having to invoke every other Democratic leader's name.
No name calling.
No, his name's Ding Dong, whatever it is. The point is, I was there. There was over a million people, and they said police are attacking, and we got there like shooting tear gas.
He keeps saying that. Were there 1 million people at the January 6th protest? That seems so unlikely.
Probably like at least tens of thousands, maybe like 100,000, but probably not even.
Yeah, but like 1 million?
Yeah. Also, I've been like quite critical of Alex Jones, but I will say just like being told you can't call him Ding Dong and just pretending like he thought that was Destiny's name is like a great bit.
Sometimes you do gotta hand it to him.
And then a bunch of feds helped break through with some idiots that got mad, had a brawl, and then the cops go, "Come on in, everybody, come on in."
So Alex,
so there's everybody sees those videos now.
Okay,
so you call this the new Pearl Harbor, worse than 9/11. 3,000 people. Do you disagree? Let me ask you this: do you disagree with them claiming this was worse than Pearl Harbor or 9/11?
I think it depends how you ask that question. I would say no, it's not worse than Pearl Harbor or 9/11.
What are you basing on it? Are you basing?
No. I get it. No. Trying to take people's votes away is sacrosanct, but you're trying to take people vote with Trump.
There's an unprecedented that a president of the United States would do everything within his power to prevent the peaceful transfer of power to the next president.
He said, "I want you to peacefully march down to the Capitol."
That is a uniquely horrible event.
So
the
horrible.
march to the Capitol. What was bad was him watching the riot happen for 3 hours and doing nothing.
No, it took him. It was the riot was happening. He spoke for an hour and a half. It started then. Then he got back to the White House, watched it like 30, 40 minutes, and then shot a video.
No, you're lying. He got back to the White House. He got Mark Meadows delivered a note on his desk that Ashley Babbitt had been shot, and he sat there sipping Diet Coke for an hour and a half. The guy that you called your leader.
The way they run these headlines,
how many pardons,
I was there.
How many pardons did Trump do for the patriots that got unfairly charged with crimes and convicted in the Capitol?
I was there.
Why didn't Donald Trump pardon any of those people? Why didn't Donald Trump pardon any of those people?
Timelines.
There's not going to be an answer to this because there's not. You're scared to answer any questions.
They claimed their timelines.
Every single
for almost an hour and a half.
Just keep it one at a time. It's
Capital when he first started speaking. So you had an hour and a half on didn't exist. I was there.
So you were there, Alex. So tell me, were there weapons there?
No, nobody used weapons.
So are you telling?
Yes, there were weapons. You're right. You got me.
He's going to say the cops.
Yeah, they shot Ashley Babbitt and they threw people off the balcony and they beat a woman's brains out. You're right.
There were 75.
Oh no, nobody shot a woman. Nobody beat a woman to death.
Nobody beat a woman on the ground. That's a fake video that got put out. That was not real.
Ashley Babbitt's fake, folks.
It was
wow.
I like how you would think that years after the event, we're now getting unreleased footage. Like there were 1,000 people sitting right around it. There's video of that event from 5 different angles without her getting beat by a baton. How would that take years to report?
Oh my God! Everybody on X, get him saying they didn't beat a woman to death.
Everybody watching, go to Google.
Yeah. Let's.
You just screwed yourself.
All right.
I asked you about.
Got your ass. Woo!
All right. Alex,
yeah, got his ass now.
Once you're done celebrating,
Ashley Babbitt, nobody died. Old woman didn't get drugged in by the cops and beat by batons.
This is an Eagles-Cowboys game. What is that?
No, he wants to do little one-ups and just.
So what Trump fans are.
Hope the audience only goes off how much emotion there is.
Okay,
I can top you.
Alex,
I can top you.
Buddy. Calm down.
Here we go.
Okay, so you said the weapons were the Fed shooting at.
I mean, I told you this was going to be entertaining.
If I've been doing this shit wrong, like the next time I do a debate, like if I make what I think is a good point, should I start shouting, "I got your ass"?
Yeah, declare victory. You're like, I got you.
I got your ass. I got you.
Cheering. Woo!
Woo! All right, gonna take that for a test drive next time.
Yeah.
Ashley Babbitt. What about how about the three men on the corner of 14th and Independence who had AR-15s? How about?
Oh, they use those?
They didn't use them, but
what about the pipe bomb?
I asked you a question.
Who's that?
Alex, I asked you a question if people had weapons. How about how many weapons were seized? Like,
hey, I got a dick.
75
I got a dick.
people arrested.
I'm raping people.
75 of the people arrested within the Capitol building had weapons.
Let's we have a couple of clips.
Knives and stuff. The knaves have weapons to disarm them immediately.
How about Guy Reffitt? What is he, 3%er or 3%?
Does he have nuclear weapons like Biden?
He had
Russia?
a handgun on the stairs of the Capitol building.
He had a handgun.
As he was encouraging people to.
That's worse than Pearl Harbor.
As he was telling people to go into the Capitol, as he was saying he wants to drag Nancy Pelosi out of the Capitol and hopes her head hits every stair on the way out.
Did he say go into the Capitol like Rams?
Let me just finish my point before you cut me off. He wanted to drag Nancy Pelosi out and let her head hit every stair on the way out. He said,
and a guy pooped on Pelosi.
Finish, Alex.
So we don't blame him.
Yeah, let Ed finish this point because we're going to go to Darren really quick.
He said on his way to the Capitol building that they're going to take the Capitol and insert their own government.
Yeah, so
and he had a
out of a
handgun
billion
on the
people,
steps
a
of
few
the Capitol
lunatics were there, and you call it like Martians invading and blowing the earth up. Like Glenn Greenwald said.
His intention wasn't an insurrection.
Yeah.
Are you saying his intention wasn't an insurrection? He's saying he's going to drag Nancy Pelosi out. He's saying,
and he wasn't under Trump's command.
All right.
Trump didn't tell him. Trump said go peacefully.
Alex, can I just finish and you can respond?
Yes, you can finish your point, and then we're going to go to Darren.
Can we use a mute button or something on Alex?
No, I'm not going to be run over.
So he was on his way to the Capitol building saying, we're going to take the Capitol and install our own government. He had a handgun in his handgun on the stairs of the Capitol, saying he's going to drag Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell out. But you don't have a problem with that.
He didn't use a gun.
What do you think, Darren?
Because he didn't use a gun because he didn't have the opportunity to shoot Nancy Pelosi or Mike Pence. That's okay. He didn't have access to that.
I didn't say it was okay.
Thankfully, the Capitol Police.
What about the Q shaman? What about the Q shaman they let in?
The Capitol Police.
All right. Okay.
Oh my God, a guy had a gun. We need martial law. All the Americans are guilty. You can't vote for Trump now. A guy had a gun.
I've been asked by Zero Hedge to moderate this debate, so that's what I'm going to do. Everyone, quiet down. We're going to Darren Beatty. Darren, what's happening?
What's the question here?
Is this a freaking coup? What do you think about what they've been saying as well?
I don't think it's a coup. I think question of an insurrection, you can go to the etymology of rising up. That could be anything. If we keep the proper perspective in mind, it doesn't elevate to anything resembling the Civil War, 9/11, or any of the crazy comparisons.
One guy with a gun isn't as big as the Civil War?
No.
They didn't use the gun?
Darren, keep going.
So there's that. The scope, I think, matters, and that's what we're really getting at when we talk about insurrection. The courts are politically weaponized, so I wouldn't even rest, the legitimacy and the question on the determinations of the courts, which we can see are running away with pretty wild and ridiculous theories. Weaponized court system. So there's that. And then, these, sure, there are random nut jobs who are around DC on that day and any other day. And so I don't think that's relevant to the ultimate question of whether it was a coup, whether it was an insurrection. And as I said before, the stuff about Trump and the legal theory behind his, multiple part plan, that could be an interesting discussion. It's technically outside the scope of the debate. But again, I would reiterate, anyone who knows Trump, anyone who knows people who knows Trump, 100% certainty, Trump genuinely believes that the election was stolen. He had multiple legal advisors. Many of his advisors were trying to sabotage him from day one. Just because he was advised by one of these snakes doesn't mean that he therefore agrees with what they say. He agreed with the people who told him it was stolen and that he had legal recourse to address that, which he implemented. So there's nothing that rises to an insurrection or coup about that either, even though that's outside of the scope of our discussion for today.
So Cassidy Hutchinson said that Trump said to Mark Meadows, "I don't want people to know we lost. It's embarrassing."
I'm glad that you mentioned her because this gets to the televised sham that was
well,
these.
she was under oath. Who under oath for Trump said?
Well, she changed her story a bunch.
Yeah,
she was
clearly,
under oath.
Yeah,
she was under oath. So the thing here is that listen. So the thing here is
why
that
is the January 6th committee destroying the transcript?
The January 6th committee called near 98% of their witnesses were Republicans.
It was kangaroo.
These people were under oath, Republicans, and they testified. The people who didn't testify within the Trump circle, there were dozens who Fifth Amendment, they refused to say a word. So you're going to tell me that the people that testified under oath are the liars, but the people that said things in the public but failed to say anything under oath are the ones that are telling the
truth. Let me say, I wasn't just there on January 6th. I was in that congressional hearing and took the fifth 98 times. And not because I had anything to hide. The Fifth Amendment isn't just to incriminate yourself. It's because they wanted me in a perjury trap. They were to have witnesses claim something wasn't true. I think attacking the Capitol makes us win an election?
Yeah, but witnesses against their testimony versus you can't get you in perjury. They can't.
Oh, yeah. Just ask Roger Stone that question.
No, it doesn't happen that way. How did perjury get Roger Stone that way?
Roger Stone wasn't involved with WikiLeaks. He worked here then. He couldn't get a hold of him. I knew he told the truth. He didn't tell anybody I'm behind the WikiLeaks. They said Roger Stone ran WikiLeaks. He never even talked to Julian Assange.
They say he ran WikiLeaks.
No, they freaking tried to put him
in communication. I think this is getting off topic.
Oh my God!
This is off topic.
That's
okay.
Roger didn't lie to Congress when he said, "I don't know I have not interviewed Assange."
Let's pull back to Darren. Darren's going to finish off what you were saying about this, and I think Glenn, you were going to mention something after that, and then I have a couple of clips that we're going to play. But Darren,
yeah, I mean the January 6th hearings were a show trial of the sort that would make Kim Jong-il blush.
Explain it to them. They wouldn't let Republicans that they wanted under the law on the committee.
They wanted Jim Jordan, who was actually part of the
You're not allowed to have you on your side. We pick who the people are on our jury.
Jim Jordan was being investigated by the committee.
Trump
They wanted a person on the committee who was being investigated by the committee. How does that make sense?
Oh my God, when you're being investigated by the Democrats, you don't have a vote.
I think a lot of people watching don't understand. Hey guys,
Jim Jordan was elected.
Does
they don't
that
have
matter?
The people that are listening don't have the context. So if we start rapid fire argumentation, a lot of people are going to lose interest. We need to stay focused and listen to each other. It's really important.
Staying focused makes it really hard for them to win their case.
It is really hard.
Win their case when they have to stay focused.
It's all very hard, but
with any of their views of reality.
It is possible.
Well, I'm going to go take a piss, and I'll let you tell people fairy tales.
But what's happening is Darren is going to continue what you were saying about finishing up your thought. And we're going to Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah, well, the thought was just about this Hutchinson, and she said a lot of things. I believe she was the one who said that Trump reached over to the steering wheel and, told the Secret Service this or that, which was a bizarre thing because the Secret Service agents in question weren't the ones that were called upon to testify under oath.
Some of them testified the same thing that Cassidy Hutchinson said.
No, the Secret Service actually said we would love to testify and they weren't allowed to. The two Secret Service agents in question in that specific anecdote were not allowed to testify. So why would they take the secondhand report from Hutchinson when they could have interrogated directly the people who would have been direct witnesses to that?
And
they're in
not those two specific agents, but why not?
Other agents in the car with Trump testified for the J6 committee. I don't know why they would or wouldn't testify or have particular people testify, but other people in that car did.
No.
Yes,
Can I
people.
Yeah, Glenn.
The January 6th committee, and it's what Alex was alluding to just a second ago, is one of the biggest shams in the history of Congress, because what happened with the January 6th committee was we had a long history of 225 years of tradition in the United States Congress where whenever investigative commissions would be created within the Congress, the minority leader and the majority leader would each select the members of that committee to ensure there was fair representation by both parties. Nancy Pelosi, for the first time in the history of the United States, as Speaker of the House, refused to allow the Republicans who were chosen for that committee by Kevin McCarthy, at the time the Republican minority leader, to be seated on the panel. And as a result, the Republicans said, we're going to have nothing to do with this. And the only quote unquote Republicans that were chosen was Liz Cheney, who ended up losing her seat by 36 points, and Adam Kinzinger, who didn't bother running again because they were so unrepresentative of the Republican Party. It was a completely partisan commission. And on top of that, none of the videotapes that were available was made available to the public except for very deceitfully chosen snippets by Adam Schiff and by Liz Cheney. And it was only within the last several months that we saw all of the video footage, and what it showed makes a joke of the idea that this was a coup. You had people peacefully walking into the Capitol, led by many of the police officers who encouraged them to enter peacefully, which they did. The vast majority of people who were there at January 6th aren't even charged with using violence, and that's what makes this whole debate such a preposterous joke. If you look at how coups are carried out in other countries, you could make a much better case that the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020 was an insurrectionary movement. And the reason it matters, Destiny, is because if you're going to make arguments, there has to be an important test, which is, do you apply the same principles you're claiming to profess and believe in to cases where it undermines your partisan allegiance and your ideology, not only where it helps it? That's one of the key tests for determining the authenticity of your argument. And so if you don't think the 2020 protest movement was an insurrectionary movement against the United States government, there's no way to claim what January 6th was, especially since Trump could have done so much more to cause a coup that he did not do, because that wasn't his aim ever.
If you want to talk about applying the same standard.
Okay, first, just as a programming note, we should in the next couple minutes go to the post game for patrons. Normally we would have done that at 10 Eastern, but we got started a little bit late, you know. But I also want to say, I saw somebody in the chat a while ago say that it you know, should have been one-on-one with Destiny and Glenn Greenwald, which certainly would have been a much better debate, you know. You know, but I also just find it really hilarious that we've gotten so much more substance in the last couple minutes because Alex Jones got up to pee.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely noticed that as well. It's pretty funny, but you gotta admit it's been pretty entertaining, don't you admit?
It's been very entertaining.
Yeah, like there definitely would have been more substantive, but then again, like I would have been much less likely to watch a debate about this topic if Alex Jones wasn't in it.
Yeah. No, that's,
I mean, I would like to see Destiny and Glenn like argue though, because I do think that, yeah, I mean, on either side, they're the most reasonable of each. Although, I mean, these Krassenstein guys seem fine. I just like sometimes don't understand like I feel like they're not making like the best arguments, but they're pretty calm and like making good points for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were definitely some times, especially early on, when I think they made some really bad arguments, but at least they sort of consistently passed the minimum threshold of being calm and waiting their turn to speak and addressing the topic and not wandering off into unrelated topics, not just randomly interrupting your opponents, you know, to like just parrot back phrases they use, you know. It's like, insurrection.
Oh, the courts, lawyers. Oh,
another lawyer.
Another lawyer.
That's my favorite moment.
But what do you think about what Glenn's saying here, Ben?
Yeah, I think that again, there are two kind of components here, maybe more than that, right? One is the one about one's the like, is it a coup question? And I'm actually like much more sympathetic to like that part of his argument, right? Like that I think that the you know, that like you're really watering down, you know, that term if you use it to describe the January 6th riot. I think if you're talking about the broader attempt to overturn the election, of which January 6th was the sort of pathetic last gasp, then it gets less ridiculous, right? I mean, like it's sort of in that loose sense in which we talk about, like, you know, you might even refer to like the the impeachment of Dilma and the frame up of Lula in Brazil is like a lawfare coup, right? Like in that kind of sense, right? That I think, it does become more appropriate to talk about it that way, right? Like, and maybe also, 2000, right? You could talk about that way. But so it's like, yeah, I think that, yeah, so I'm kind of mixed on that part. How excited, I don't know. Like, I don't really get how excited he is about this procedural question about like who like traditional norms say like selects people to like serve on a committee for like to like hold hearings and make a report. Like he seems really animated about that in a way that I don't quite get. And it's like I don't know. I think like this sort of that whole aspect of the discussion seems kind of lost in the partisan noise to me. Like I don't like, why do you, is that really the biggest travesty? And like you think about all the shit Congress has done over the centuries, right? That they didn't honor this like informal norm about who gets to serve on an investigating committee. Like I just, that part seemed a little silly to me. I haven't all of the back and forth about Casey Hutchinson and all that. I'm sorry, I'm just not enough of a January 6th super fan. Able to follow that. I feel pretty good about that as a life choice. But like I kind of like I guess maybe my last thought before we wrap up, and then I'll go to you guys, is that like I kind of like what you said, I don't know, close to the beginning, Victor, about how a lot of the questions allegedly being talked about seem like proxies for like the like questions that are like actually in dispute, right? Like and there are like a few of them, but I think that like certainly one of those is how bad is it that Trump tried in numerous ways to overturn the results of a democratic election, right? Like that's a big one, right? Like maybe the one Alex keeps wanting to change the topic to. I mean, I guess if to be fair to Alex Jones, not something you get to say a lot, then maybe like the one he keeps trying to talk about like the taking Trump's name off the Colorado ballot or whatever. Maybe that's also one of those implicit background questions. But like I don't know. I just think this is like I really want. I guess this is my biggest frustration about the whole thing, right? Because like I really wish people would argue about what they're actually arguing about, right? Just like say like if you don't think that Trump tried to overturn the election was a big deal, say that, own it, right?
Yeah.
And then have the argument about it, right? Like I mean, my position, for whatever it's worth, is that it is a big deal. I think it's actually good that he's being indicted for some of that stuff. I hate that presidents and ex-presidents almost always get away with everything. But also I think his name should be on the ballot. I think he can, he could, even if the trial wraps up really quickly, he could run from prison like Jim Debs.
Yeah. I kind of think, one of the things that's frustrating about what Glenn's doing, or I think, okay, maybe let me put this a different way. I feel like maybe my charitable interpretation of like Glenn's perspective seems to be that, he which is, consistent, I guess, with his past work, is like the way that the media sensationalizes stuff. And he's like, okay, like the American media is like invested in this narrative that it's a coup and an insurrection, and they're like overblowing it. And it's really not that big of a deal. And they're really using that. And he feels just very suspicious of the way that this can be used for governments to continue to entrench their power. And that just seems to be his concern. He's just kind of transforming that. But I think like that's to his detriment, because like you kind of said, I just feel like he's totally trivializing like what was really bad about it. And it makes me think that, like, which is frustrating that he's not just arguing it directly, but it does make me think that he's just doesn't think it's a big deal. And if anything, he might just think it's a total sham, like January 6th. Like there's nothing there. It's just a tool that the media uses to like entrench more centralized power. And I just feel like that's kind of his line, and that's kind of what his underlying motivation, argumentative motivation, seems to be to me.
Yeah, and I think I've expressed this, right. I'm pretty sympathetic to that underlying motivation. It's just like, I think you should be able to walk and chew bubblegum on this, and like say like, yeah, those are good concerns to have, but also like it's really bad for the president to try to subvert the law to stay in office after he lost an election. You should be able to hold both of those thoughts in your head.
Totally. I mean, but he just seems to not think that. I don't know. It's unclear, like whether he actually thinks that attempt was real by Trump, or I don't know. I mean, he hasn't really had a chance to say it, or maybe he said it elsewhere. I can't remember if he says it later in the debate. But
something that's also a really bad sign is how much time in this debate has already been spent arguing about what they're supposed to be arguing about.
Yeah,
like adjudicating what counts as on topic or not. Like that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you say, I don't know, it's like I almost, in a way, I guess I almost wish it was a broader topic, because it's like the position that seems right to me on this. It's like, there is a certain amount of overhyping the actual riot. Like that's not the part that's the biggest deal. It's bad, right? Like political violence is very bad, especially when it's based on total nonsense. But but at the same time, the overall attempt to overturn the election was really, really bad, right? And it's like, because that's clearly a big background thing that these guys disagree on, and like I'd really like to see them have an honest argument about that. And I have very mixed feelings for the reasons that Ethan said about the presence of Alex Jones in it, because when he gets back from his pee, it's going to be impossible.
All hell is going to break loose.
All hell's going to break loose. It's going to be impossible to have a real discussion about any of it. But also, part of why I agreed to watch this is that I knew it was going to be a fascinating and entertaining shit show because Alex Jones wasn't it.
Yeah. I don't know, Ethan. Do you want to say anything about it or no?
I don't have many thoughts about this.
Fair enough. I will say,
it's like Christopher Hitchens' line about people would ask him what he thinks about David Cameron, and he'd say he doesn't make me think.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
or
great.
the one zinger that Ayn Rand had about Reagan, I think, because people are like always asking, oh, what do you think of Reagan? Do you like Reagan, Ayn Rand? And she's like, well, I don't think of him at all. And the more, or what did she say? It was something. It was like some clever quip about and the more I look, the less I think, or something, or the more I hear, the less I think.
That's funny. Yeah, no, I think I don't know. I think there have been debates we've watched that I've had less to say about just because of the topic, but this is really one where I'm just kind of I just want to kind of witness the car crash. It's just
totally unrelated, but I was doing laundry earlier today, which is across the street from my apartment, not in my apartment, and I was putting. Of course, we got loonies here, and I was trying to put this loonie into pan. I was like, why the fuck is this loonie not working? And then I look at it, and it's randomly. These, I don't know. I was going to ask you guys, how rare are they? It's a $1 American coin with Sacagawea on it.
Oh yeah.
Are those rare? Is that in the US? I feel like I've never seen one. I was
pretty rare, although I actually feel I'm trying to think it's I actually feel like I've gotten one sometimes from coin machines or whatnot, but it's they're pretty rare.
Okay, yeah, I was just because I don't think I've ever seen one, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's an American $1 coin. That's weird."
I've never seen one.
I feel like there was an old Simpsons thing where they did a thing about Sacagawea, and Marge says, "And now there's something called a Sacagawea dollar. You can take it to the bank and exchange it for a real dollar."
yeah, I think I remember that actually. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to go to the post game for patrons. We have quite a bit of this left. We're not going to finish it in the post game. We are going to actually finish it next week, but we are going to go to the post game for patrons to watch as much more of it as we can watch tonight. If you are already a patron, you should have an email or just go to the Patreon and you should see the link for the post game. If you're not, there's no time like the present, $5 a month. The cost of a milkshake at a 50s nostalgia diner in 1994. You get access to all the Monday and Thursday night post games, Discord server. Sometimes you get stuff in advance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But mostly our undying love and appreciation for helping to keep this going. All the rest is just a way of saying thank you. And with that, we will cut it out for the main show tonight and go to the post game where we will watch at least a little bit more of this and finally settle the question of who got whose ass.